Hi, everyone. Good evening, thank you for joining us here tonight. I'm Karin Deutsch Karlekar, the Director of Writers at Risk, and on behalf of PEN America, I'm honored to welcome you to this special event entitled Women's Voices from the Revolution, Book Launch and Conversation with Writers from Myanmar. As we gather here virtually from around the world, we're joined by a powerful lineup of voices. We'll hear from the chair of PEN International Writers in Prison Committee, Ma Thida, who will be in conversation with the Burmese writer A Phyu and ALTSEAN-Burma founder Debbie Stothard. A quick note regarding our code of conduct. We aim to have our events be respectful spaces for our panelists and attendees. Racism, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, and any other forms of disrespect, harassment, hate speech, and intimidation will not be tolerated. If your behavior constitutes harassment, we retain the right to remove you from the meeting. We appreciate you respecting and abiding by this code of conduct. For today's event, I'll start with briefly outlining our research and advocacy supporting writers at risk in Myanmar. Then, we'll show a short video about the Women's Writers Workshop. Ma Thida, A Phyu, and Debbie will have a conversation discussing the anthology as well as two readings from the volume. And finally, we'll have a brief Q&A session, so please feel free to drop questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. We'll have concluding remarks and discuss ways you can support at the end of the webinar. PEN America remains steadfast in its work for more than a decade to support writers and free expression in Myanmar, a country that continues to rank among the world's top jailers of writers. According to PEN America's Stolen Freedoms report, creative artists, which includes writers, poets, musicians, and more, have led resistance efforts for decades against both colonial and military rule, drawing from a long history of protest through art. Many artists and writers have faced detention, abuse, exile, and even death. Myanmar Spring Diary, a collection of short stories and poems written in the aftermath of the 2021 coup, reflects on the courage, sacrifices, and tragic losses of the Spring Revolution. This is available on PEN America's website. Myanmar remains a grave concern for free expression advocates and remains a top jailer of writers. Among the alarming cases is that of pioneer screenwriter, filmmaker, and Radio Free Asia's contributor Shin Dai-wei, who was arrested in October 2023 for carrying a drone intended for her filmmaking work, and later sentenced to life imprisonment under the counterterrorism law. This was later reduced to 15 years in 2025, but is still a lengthy sentence. Columnist Titu Aung Myint, a Voice of America contributor, has faced similar repression. Arrested in 2021 for alleged incitement and defamation of the armed forces, he was sentenced to 3 years of hard labor in 2022. And writer Wai Mo Ning, a prominent figure in the civil disobedience movement, also remains detained and facing sentences totaling 34 years, which is emblematic of the regime's extreme crackdown on dissent. These cases underscore Myanmar's worsening crackdown on free expression and the growing risks faced by journalists and writers, exacerbated now by the defunding of critical platforms like Radio Free Asia and Voice of America by the Trump administration's recent executive order, which have been lifelines for independent voices. These individuals are enduring severe punishment for their commitment to truth and justice, and we call for their immediate and unconditional release, along with the release of all writers, journalists, and activists worldwide who are imprisoned for exercising their right to free expression. Now it's my honor to introduce our moderator for the next part of the discussion, Ma Thida. Ma Thida is an acclaimed author, activist, medical doctor, and former prisoner of conscience, having published over 24 books in Burmese and several in English, including The Roadmap, Prisoner of Conscience, My Steps Through Insane, and A Maze, Myanmar's Struggle for Democracy, 2011 to 2023. Sentenced to 20 years in prison for her activism in 1993, she was released in 1999 and has since been recognized with numerous international awards, including the PEN Barbara Goldsmith Freedom to Write Award and Václav Havel's Disturbing the Peace Award. A former fellow at Brown and Harvard Universities from 2008 to 2010, Ma Thida has continued her advocacy in exile, serving as a scholar with PEN Germany's Writer in Exile program since 2023. She served as the board president of PEN Myanmar in 2013 and has been a board member of PEN International. Currently, she chairs PEN International's Writers in Prison Committee. And it's been my pleasure personally to work with Ma Thida for, I think, about a decade on PEN's advocacy work, and it's a pleasure to have her moderating the discussion today. Welcome, Ma Thida.
Thank you so much, Karin. Yeah, our relationship between PEN Myanmar and PEN America has been more than a decade already. And indeed, compared to the other PEN centers, I think PEN Myanmar is more rely on the active writers in Myanmar to be part of its advocacy and the literature scenes. For that reason, I really want to highlight here on the issue of the role of writers after especially in this situation at risk. In most of the writers, the established writers in Myanmar are not just storytellers. They are style of writing, they are way of writing, their way of disseminating their opinions is always matters, because the not just the stories but also the freedom of opinions is heavily involved in their way of writing, expression, and their way of conducting the recitation of their own poetries or the short stories or any stories or novella, something like that. So this very much have been appreciated by the readership. For that reason, throughout this history, the military dictators always think seriously about the role of writers on their influence onto the readership as a threat to the dictatorship, because the writers can convince, and not just with their storytelling power, but also with their sharing their freedom of opinions. It always matters to make the audience, to make the readership, to make the society more actively responding to whatever happens to them. So for that reason, I think the writers are always at risk throughout this history, and obviously after this coup, there are so many writers are still at risk and still cannot practice very well about their opinion. But here we having the writers workshop, women's writer workshop. So shall we just see how this women's writers workshop having done?
Ma woke to find soldiers in the streets of the capital, Naypyidaw, and Yangon City.
The military announced a year-long state of emergency, promising new elections.
Fragile democracy shattered. A military general determined to hold on to power.
There's no sign the generals are ready to give up control.
On February 1st, 2021, the Burma military began a coup to overturn the results of the general election.
The party won re-election by a landslide, almost wiping out pro-military opposition.
Women led protests against the coup.
People in Myanmar have taken to the streets to protest against the military takeover. People here are aware of the military's brutal repression of past uprisings, but some say
protests
they're not afraid.
are still happening. The illegal junta crackdown. More than 29,000 people have been arrested. 22,000 are still in jail.
Across Myanmar, the military is carrying out airstrikes.
There have been more than 53,000 armed clashes and attacks on civilians, including 4,000 airstrikes.
On one side, fighters of the People's Defence Force, or PDF, young and idealistic, driven to turn back the military coup of 2021.
The ongoing stalemate has not softened the PDF's will to push on.
The resistance now controls more than half the country. All around the country and the world, women of Burma continue to resist. Here are some of their stories.
တတိယအခန်းဆိုတဲ့ဝတ္ထုလေးကိုကျွန်မရေးခဲ့တယ်
ဒီစစ်ကြောရေးစက္ကန့်ထဲမှာဖြတ်တန်းခဲ့ကိုနဲ့တူဖြတ်တန်းခဲ့ကိုရဲ့နောက်တစ်ခုတူရှိခဲ့ရဆိုတဲ့အကြောင်းကိုရေးထားရဆိုတဲ့ဟာမျိုးပေါ့
ကိုဝင်ဆောင်ရခြင်းရဲ့နောက်ဆက်တွဲပေါ့နော်ကိုဝင်ဆောင်ရခြင်းနဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးတော့ကျွန်မဝတ္ထုတစ်ပုဒ်ရေးခဲ့တယ်
ကျွန်တော်တို့တကယ်ဖြစ်ပျက်နေတဲ့မြေပြင်မှာ data မှာဖြစ်ပျက်နေတဲ့လက်တွေ့ကိုလည်းကျွန်မထည့်ပြီးမှရေးထားရဖြစ်တယ်အချစ်ချင်းကြားကဒလိဆိုတဲ့ဒလိယူဆဆိုတဲ့ပုံပြီးတစ်ခုကိုရေးဖြစ်ပါတယ်
ပုံမှန်နေ့စဉ်ဘဝမှာလည်းကြုံတွေ့နိုင်လို့ LGBT community ကလူတွေလည်းကြုံတွေ့နိုင်တဲ့ဒီလုပ်ငန်းခွင်အကြမ်းဖက်မှုပေါ့နော် workplace harassment နဲ့ပတ်သက်တဲ့ story လေးကိုတင်ဆက်ထားပါတယ်ရှင်
I want to introduce our speaker first. One is A Phyu. A Phyu is a Burmese Muslim woman who was arrested in 2021 for raising her voice against the military coup in Myanmar. Now she resettled in the United States through a refugee program. She continues her work as a mental health support worker, focusing on the emotional well-being of vulnerable Burmese communities. Her advocacy centers on the power of storytelling as a tool of healing resistance and restoring dignity. You can soon hear her voice. She will recite part of her stories, and it's perfectly reflect her work as a mental health support worker and her work as a good storyteller. And another one is Debbie Stothard, and since 1981, Debbie Stothard, a Malaysian, has worked as a crime reporter, government advisor, human rights advocate, and educator. In 1996, she founded ALTSEAN-Burma to develop innovative human rights training and advocacy programs. She is the chief of board at the International Network for Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights and chair of Innovation for Change, as well as being a board member at the Association for Women's Rights in Development. Debbie is a grassroots-focused activist and has developed training programs focused on the thematic priorities of business and human rights. Human rights focus, macroeconomic policy, atrocity prevention, and women's leadership, and has been involved in more than 400 training workshops in the past 19 years, with many held in rural areas and conflict-affected zones. Shall we move on to the conversation, or we still need to wait for the video? I'm not
I think
sure.
Ma Thida, let's move on to the conversation right now. I think they're still working on it. So yeah, let's go to the conversation.
Okay,
Thank you so much. We'll try to get the video and the sound working. Thank you.
May I start from A Phyu? You know, I love your story, and we would love to have you read around about 4-5 minute section of your story aloud, and then I will ask the first question. Let's listen to A Phyu first.
For gods. During these times, it became a habit to mutter for gods, calling on the deities of all four religions whenever I felt helpless. I expected the worst to happen, but I didn't think that so many soldiers would come to arrest four unarmed people like us. While my friends lay belly down on the floor, soldiers pressed military boots on their spines and pointed guns at them from above. You have to survive, my guys. I whispered to them from my heart. It was what we said as we clinked our glasses when drinking together. I hoped they read my mind. Stop walking on them for a moment. I'll ask this bitch first and make her words come out. Hey bitch, keep your chest touching the floor. Put your hands on your head and hold your hands together. My favorite slogan was, I would never kneel under military boots. But my worried father's voice came into my ears. If you are in the hands of the enemy, you have to be smart enough and show some obedience, daughter. Yes, sir. Though I tried to be obedient, it still didn't help father. If my back could speak, it would beg the military boots to stop. You guys should have some consideration for the limits of whom you are kicking. You slap me, you pull my ponytail, you kick my back, you yell your questions at me without pause. I was beaten more because I couldn't answer. How could there be time to answer so many questions while they were beating me from above? In the confusion, I just said, I don't know, sir. So he kept yelling questions over and over again. This bitch is so stubborn. Drag her to the back. They just dragged me, but my nose, which was pointed more than necessary, had to breathe in the dirt and dust accumulated on the floor along the way. I don't know if this is what people mean by eat dust when they dismiss unwelcome questions. If I imagined this would happen, I would at least have organized myself to sweep the floor. Now the garbage was up my nose. I can rape you now. We haven't done it yet. Answer my question truthfully. If you give us the truth, we will leave you. We will only take your friends. Hey, I'm here for you, said my comrade. She was with me when my father was in critical condition because there was not enough oxygen in the hospital. During the time after my father passed away, when I had to be alone in quarantine, when my friends were arrested, when times were at their worst. Now, when I was in trouble, she appeared again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, A Phyu. I know this is the real story of your own, and so this experience, how did this impact on you personally, and why you decided to write this for this anthology?
Yeah, sorry. To be honest, I decided to share my story not just for myself, but for so many others who went through similar pain, especially for the women I met during my detention. I wanted to speak out not only about what happened to me, but also on behalf of those who can't speak for themselves. And one thing is, even in the darkest moments, I saw people resist, not with weapons, but with survival, just by staying alive, holding on, or staying, human. So that was resistance too. And the women I met were incredibly strong, even while they were suffering. They showed so much quiet power. Um, so I carry their faces with me. So when I wrote this story, I was not telling about mine. It was I was telling theirs too. So the impact, the writing, it was really hard, and because I had to revisit all those painful memories, I felt like I was back in that room, like with the same smell, uh, and the fear, and also the silence. And also I felt survival guilt too. And of course, I miss my friends, and I miss all those brave women that I met in my darkest times. So at one point, I thought I couldn't finish it because it was really hard for me to, um, breathe while I was writing this story. So, but Debbie and the team gave me strength and encouragement, and they reminded me why I started. So, however, I could finish it. Um, After I wrote my lessons, my last paragraph, it felt like something heavy inside me had became a little bit lighter. And when it comes to the time that um, when I read my story out loud to the people in the workshop, it was like for the first time in a very long time, I felt really hard. So that moment was healing for me, and that woman was really beautiful. So and this story is about appreciating myself and all the bravest women in the world for uh, for surviving, who are still surviving, and who already survived. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, most of the writers use not just their own personal stories, but also bring other stories into their writing. So the writing workshop itself is very important. And then I will move to Debbie. This Women's Voices anthology is already been the 10th issue, the 10th version already. So you run this women writers workshop for so long, and but what inspired the ALTSEAN-Burma to continue this women's writers workshop despite the increasing risks under the junta, and what makes this current one, this anthology, particularly significant in the context of the current political climate?
Thank you, Dr. Ma Thida. It's always a pleasure to be sharing the same space with you, and an honor. And a shout out to all our viewers, especially somebody who actually joins us from Australia, where it's like 2 a.m. in the morning. So that's dedication. These stories written from the heart share an emotional and spiritual truth that is not immediately obvious in, say, a human rights report. And actually, one of the things that happen is that, the longer I work in the movement and meet a lot of young people, especially women, sharing their stories, and I just go like, someone has to read them. We need to have these stories written down and not disappear. So this was really about learning. When the more we are friends, the more we trust each other, the more stories we share, and that depth, and it really really touched my heart. And when people say, you've been doing this for nearly 40 years, and aren't you tired? This is so depressing, all these terrible things are happening. It's actually these stories of resilience, these stories of reflection, that really give you that mental and emotional energy to keep going. I mean, a lot of women said, oh, we've been writing all this human rights documentation and these reports and these terrible human rights violations, but there's this other stuff that we are experiencing as well that we can't report. So this is also trying to create a safe space. Janie Conway Heron, an Australian musician and author, who was a retired professor in creative writing and an old friend of mine. We were student activists together back at University days. she reconnected with me about 20 years ago. She hunted me down and I said, oh, you're teaching creative writing. Oh, good. The women have been, in my network, have been wanting to do these workshops, come and train us. And it was really amazing because Janie is a very compassionate and kind and gentle person, a bit, whereas I'm a little bit harsher and edgier. Anyway, so she was the perfect person to do these workshops, and many of the women who participated, and I say trans women, I also mean trans women and trans men who joined the workshop, felt like it was almost a form of therapy. So it really brought tears to my eyes when A Phyu said, after she finished the story, she felt like a weight had been lifted. And I think a lot of women came away from the workshop experience feeling like that and feeling much more motivated to do the story. And, you know, this is an anthology of 40 pieces. It is crazy to imagine that you would want to put 40 pieces into a book. But it was my colleagues, my team members, May Kim and Sue Pott, who did a lot of the legwork, who also continued to stay in touch with the writers with a lot of care and a lot of love and compassion. And they refused to cut a single story. They said, I said, you know, these books are going to be so big. They're going to be so heavy. This is going to take a lot of work. We have to translate, edit, and re-edit and retranslate and do the layout. And they said, even if we have to work weekends and public holidays, we're going to do it. So for them, they felt cutting a story was like cutting the women who wrote the stories. So that's why we have such a giant book. Yeah, so that's the thing that every few years people ask, hey, are we going to have another workshop? Are you going to do another book? And so there's so much interest to write. And what is really exciting was in the beginning when we said, hey, we're going to collect the stories and publish it. A lot of women who are first-time writers from rural areas, from ethnic minorities, who they said, oh, we're not educated women, so we can't write. You know, we can't write in a proper style. We said the only proper way to tell your story is from your heart. You don't have to worry about your vocabulary, just tell the story. So that's something that was really, really great that continues to drive us. This story, these workshops and this book came out after the coup began in February 2021. And a lot of people wanted to share their stories. A lot of people had things to say. And what was very exciting was there are a lot of new emerging writers who want to share the story. Like A Phyu, we've been so privileged. I think we're the first ones to publish a story we think about her. And I know this is not going to be her last story, so we're so happy to be part of that process.
Well, yeah, I'm really happy to hear from this point of view. Yeah, of course, the storytelling is more or less, you know, very much contributing to the resistance against oppression. Not very many people notice it, but it is. And it's also the storytelling contribute to the advocacy for the human rights in Myanmar. So I think in this case, I just want to hear from both of you, you know, how do you see the storytelling, the power of storytelling, the contributing power of storytelling in the resistance against the oppression, in the advocacy for the human rights? So, if you will answer first.
Yeah, I believe storytelling is one of the most powerful tools we have for resistance, especially in places like Myanmar, where truth is constantly silenced. So when we tell our stories, we are not just talking about the past. We are recording truth we are capturing like what really happened from the eyes of the people who lived it. So every time we speak or write, we are building a record, a living memory that I think refuses to disappear. So in a country where people are being silenced, in where like voices are being crushed, so I think that act of remembering become a form of resistance too. I feel like the regime can take away all of our freedom, but I think they can't erase our voices once they are written or spoken. From what I've experienced, the more they oppress us, the more we raise our voices. So and the truth is, the junta is really afraid of public voices. So that's why they don't just arrest writers, but even the regular people who post um, their opinions, their personal feelings, or their thoughts online. Um, and before I was released, they want me like not to post anything on social media and not to, like speak to anyone what happened. So they said if we see anything, be prepared to come back. So but that kind of threat shows how they are afraid of people speaking out. Um, so that's also why they cut off internet access, like restricted social media. So they want to block our our stories from reaching others. So for me, storytelling is not just about remembering, but it's also about resisting, and it is about saying we are still here. Um, um, and that's exactly what make it so powerful. And because they are afraid of it, they are afraid of the public voices. So yeah, so storytelling becomes a way of fighting back, not with the uh, violence, but with the truth. And the truth is what they fear the most. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. How about Debbie? In your case, how do you think the storytelling?
I think you know, one of the one of our main focus, like the people the activists that we work with, that we really reach out to in our work are women and young people. And and for many women to see their stories in print is a very big validation of their lived experience, of their opinions, of their voices. You know, I think traditionally in most societies, it's women and young people who are very often marginalized, their opinions and their voices. So I think in Burmese society and in all the different ethnic groups in Burma, the seeing something of theirs printed is a very big honor and validation. And so it's amazing when we see people receiving the books and getting really excited and feeling so happy. And we're just so glad that they feel happy about their story, that they felt that their voice was treated respectfully. And in this case, these books were published in both Burmese language and in English. So this is something that, I mean, I I meet with women who've written for the previous anthologies as well. Some of them felt so motivated to keep on writing. And so that was really amazing. But some of them became much more confident about expressing themselves. And that's really why we have a kick-ass feminist movement from Burma. It's really amazing. So for me, that's the impact. But, seriously, since this illegal junta started the coup in February 2021, they've arrested nearly 30,000 people. And several hundred, a few thousand people have died. So, you know, it's a big number. But when you read A Phyu story, you start to understand there's 30,000 people who went through similar experiences, that feeling of powerlessness. The women being threatened, routinely threatened with rape as part of the interrogation, very casually being threatened like that. So then, you know, you start to understand, you know, those human rights reports, those dry human rights reports, are just the tip of the iceberg. What you're reading really means something very, very horrific on a very wide scale. And if we can connect with A Phyu through a story, we should be able to be willing to connect with those 30,000 persons.
Very good point, Debbie. So I really noticed, as you mentioned, you know, even when they released these women and the other political prisoners, they even warned them, oh, do you dare to post your experience, something like that. So they're really afraid of the storytelling power. But I really want to ask this question to A Phyu. You know this is the risk, but you did right. Still, you are not safe outside the country, but there are so many other people, as Debbie mentioned, so many people still facing risks. It's a kind of not just the personal risks, but also this is the collective risks involved in this. So yeah, how to navigate this kind of risks involved in the writing under the current regime? I really wonder.
Yeah, honestly, the risks are always there, especially when you are writing under this kind of regime. Uh, but I try to be careful. I don't share everything publicly, and I am mindful of what I say and where I say it. And one good thing for me is all of my friends who were arrested together with me are now outside of the country, so that gives me a little more space to speak. But yeah, safety is always on my mind. And still, the only reason why I left my country is to speak up, like to tell stories that many people can't tell, to be a voice for those who are still inside, and to show what's happening in places the world cannot easily see. So this is my purpose, and I don't want to let fear silence it. So I mean, if they use fear to silence us, why can't we speak with the power of our voices? That the thing that they fear the most. So yeah, I'm cautious, but I keep speaking because it matters, and because if we don't tell these stories, who will?
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think I really want to recite a couple of passages from another story since the book is so rich. So I selected the one small little piece from the journalist diary by Ma. Here, my job was not just to take photos in Yangon. I was also constantly in touch with photographers in other towns outside of Yangon. I was always monitoring their photos, and if necessary, I would buy them to use for my office. So I had to monitor the news 24 hours a day. On the 3rd of March, when Jason was killed in Mandalay, my already tense mind collapsed violently. As I was monitoring photos and videos that might be useful for the office, her news kept coming up on my Facebook page. I had to watch the incidents again and again. I couldn't run away from this news. Finally, I shut down the computer and sat down in the corner of the room and cried. When I picked up the call from my boss in the office, he comforted me with concern when he heard my sobbing voice. He told me that the work I was doing was important He was whispering that he understood how hard I was and that I needed to take a rest. After I finished crying, I wiped my tears and went back to work. That pattern of working and crying became my life almost every day. The most heartbreaking days were when I had to report on funerals, when my mind couldn't keep calm while taking pictures. One day, I arrived early in the morning at the house of some rickshaw drivers who had gone on a night strike in Pakita. At the first house, when they lifted the towel from over the body, I saw the corpse with the brain open and half of it head missing, with 3 or 4 flies around. But I didn't turn away. I gritted my teeth and continued taking pictures. I went to the next house. The widow's sons hugged her tightly from behind while she was crying near her husband's dead body. I stayed in the corner of the room and I took pictures. My head was pounding with the sound of that woman's voice, the whispering from the people around, and the clicks of my camera shutter. My tears flowed, but I kept taking pictures. After all, wasn't it my job? So I can read more, but we run out of a couple of minutes already. So my next question, I will just want to have our conversation a little bit shorter, since we need to welcome for the question and answer. So I just want to talk about, back to A Phyu, how do you think women's voices, because this is the listening to your recitation and listening to the photographer's diary, it's very strong and empathetic women's voices, it's very clear. So yeah, I just want to know about, yeah, how do you think of women's voices to shed the light on the Honduras abuses?
For this anthology, this anthology shares powerful real life stories that we rarely see in the news. So, for example, young women talking about leaving behind their families and homes, and others open up being rejected by the society just for being themselves, especially those from LGBTQ plus community. So these voices also shed light on how the country system continues to harm the women and children through domestic violence, gender-based violence, and also deep-rooted injustice. But this book doesn't just talk about the pain, but it also points directly to the root causes. One thing is the military dictatorship and the system of fear and control that has ruled for decades. So yeah, that is why these voices matter. They are not just stories; they are the historical record of what's really happening.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I also wonder, Debbie, how do you think, what's the challenges do you face in the publishing and distributing this kind of anthologies under the Honduras roof? Because will be not an easy job for you.
We used to have the workshops in the country during the time of transition, but after the coup, it became quite clear that we had to stick to the Thai side of the border. So we did the workshops in 4 different locations all along the Thai-Burma border. And there were a couple of people who were able to sneak out of the country and join us confidentially in these workshops. So we had to actually take a lot of security precautions for both the participants who were based in the border and who were traveling from inside. And we must understand that transnational repression is quite prevalent in places like Mesa and other border towns. There's a lot of surveillance and cooperation between some elements of the Thai authorities and the military. So we have to actually have these workshops secretly. You know, and it's a bit freaky sometimes, like in one place when people heard about the workshop, everybody wanted to come. And we were going like, no, we can't have so many people. It's a security risk. And in the end, we had to break up people we had to hide people in our hotel rooms and use our hotel rooms as workshop spaces as well. So we do that. And we're still working. We're still doing the work, but definitely we cannot afford to let people know where our office location is and where we're holding these workshops. And so it's a little bit secretive, but you know, the women's network is so vibrant. When they know there's a workshop on, people will say, we heard there's a workshop on, why are we not invited? And so it becomes like that. But you know, there is a strong sense of community in these spaces, and people do take care and look out for each other. And I think what's really revolutionary, and when I say women's voices from the revolution, it's also a social revolution, because people are being more intentional in this movement to be inclusive and to support safe spaces for each other. And so we have women who were Muslim, and Muslim women were very traditionally marginalized. We had trans men and trans women feeling confident to come into these spaces and share the stories. And we had Rohingya women as well. So it was really something very special. We're very proud of this book because a Rohingya woman writes the foreword and a young Rohingya feminist writes the last piece. So she gets the last word. But we have pieces by also Muslim women, different women from different parts of the country, and a trans man and a trans woman write of their own experiences as well. So I think it's so special, and we just feel like I know it's a lot of hard work, and it's a little bit dangerous, but it's just so worth it.
Thank you, Debbie. You actually did answer one of the questions that had come into the Q&A chat about some of the logistics of the workshop. So thank you for preemptively jumping in on that question that had come in. So now I just wanted to jump into the Q&A. We only have a little bit of time left, but and Debbie, thank you for answering one of the questions that had come in already. But one of the other questions that I had, I think for you know, both Ma Thida and our panelists, is to find out like what you hope readers, especially those outside of Myanmar, would take away from the anthology, and also how can the international community best support Myanmar's writers and activists during this time? As we know, it's there's a lot going on in the world. It's very difficult to keep the world's attention on what's been going on, but you know, people want to help, and we would love to get your thoughts on how people can help in what's an ongoing civil war and repression of human rights and creative and literary expression. So yeah, I don't mind, Debbie or A Phyu, you feel free to jump in.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. If you are not a member of PEN America and you're living in the US, please join PEN America and support its work on Myanmar. That's the simplest thing to do. But I think also we need to recognize that the Trump administration's cuts on democracy, support for the democracy movement and humanitarian work has really impacted our work. We're very lucky that this book project was, for this edition, was actually supported financially by A Phyu, Union Aid Abroad in Australia. So we were using Australian money to put this together. If not, we would have been absolutely screwed, pardon my French, if we were relying on US funds. But a lot of the movement relied on US funding. So if the US government won't support this movement, I think we're gonna have to rely on the American people to support in every way that we can. That's very basic, practical things like contributing money, but also talk about the issue, post about the issue, read about it and talk about it, because the visibility of what's going on has died down, and it needs. And I don't want to feel we shouldn't be looking at what's happening, the attacks on human rights and freedom of expression in the US cannot be separated from the attacks on human rights in Burma, in Palestine, in Ukraine, anywhere else, in Sudan, in Yemen. It's all so connected, and how we resist that is also connected. So I think there's so many ways that people can do something, and I think just by reading about these women, young women and older women, who have found ways, even under the most restrictions and the least resources, still found ways to speak up and do something. It's a lesson to us all that we can do something. I think this is really, really important. And I never imagined in my life that I would see something happening in the US that was so similar to something happening in Burma. The reprisals for speaking out, the threat, the air threat. This is and just the undermining of fundamental freedoms. So we all have to work together to protect our collective freedoms. And we have to work together to resist those attacks, regardless of how far they've gone. If we can resist in Burma, then we can resist in the US too.
No, thank you, Debbie. That pulls everything together, I think, really, really nicely. And I would encourage, I mean, obviously, support for Burmese diaspora communities. I mean, there are many exiled people from Myanmar in the US, and encouraging continued support and their ability to stay in the US is very, very important, as well as support, obviously from the US government for free expression, for human rights, for some of these independent media outlets to get news and information to and from and inside and out of Myanmar. So thank you to all of our panelists. In closing, thank you, Ma Thida, for moderating the conversation. Thank you, A Phyu and Debbie, for sharing your experiences and your thoughts. Thank you very much to ALTSEAN-Burma and the whole team. Before logging out, we would encourage everyone to read the full anthology. I believe the link has been put in the chat, and we will also follow up with an email with a link to the anthology, with a link hopefully to the video, and suggestions of how you can become further involved. Also, please follow ALTSEAN-Burma and PEN America on different social media platforms, including X, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. And we really encourage people to, keep showing support, keep supporting writers in Myanmar and the right to obviously free expression as well. So thank you everyone from joining in all around the world. We appreciate it. And please let's keep the conversation going and the connections around the world and support for free expression. Thank you very much from both PEN America and from ALTSEAN-Burma.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks, PEN America, for hosting this. This is so great.
Thank you very much, ALTSEAN-Burma and PEN America, and all of the attendees who are joining this. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah.